All right, let's get our Facebook groups in here before it is time to start the show. Gonna hit that start button here. Gonna start the music. Gonna start the show. All right, we got one more. Come on, there we go. All right, welcome in, welcome in, welcome in. It is Tuesday the 26th. It's time for an episode of Building the Broncos. I am Nick Kendall, and as always, Carl Dumler. Carl, how you doing? Happy Boxing Day to you. Is that what's going on? I don't know my British holidays that well.
There you go. No, I'm doing well. We got some snow out here. I know you're missing that from the Midwest. It's like 50-mile-per-hour winds
Oh.
and like 5 inches of snow, which turns into like 3-foot drifts,
Mm-hmm.
which are always fun to walk through to get to work. The snow likes to pile in front of my office,
Hmm.
and I know you all don't know where I work, but my office is right across the street from my house. So I can't use the excuse of, oh, the snow's out there, I don't have to work today. I still had to work today.
Well, do you have those like wind walls and everything set up too to keep the orange mesh kind of protect things from blowing? Oh man,
No, we're not as
Kansas.
cool as Colorado.
I guess not, man. You got to have that, otherwise you're gonna get some damage there. But yeah, well, I'm not envious of that. We had a little bit of sun today. It was a nice 50, 52 degrees, I think, out here, so can't complain. And I think it's cold in Denver. I mean, Denver is one of the most bipolar weather cities in the country with the mountains there. So I don't know. I know it was cold this weekend. Hopefully, it's a little bit nicer for you guys there now, unless you're hoping to hit the slopes. And hopefully, you're warmer than the Broncos are, other than maybe some seats getting warm out there in Death Valley. But we're going to get into that today. Let's say hello to some people coming in here into the chat as we start the show. We got David Youngkin coming in saying good for him, talking about Kareem Jackson because the Broncos need to go into rebuild mode and think really hard about if they want to keep Russ or cut him post June deadline. Yeah, it's we'll see what happens. We got 2 more games still, but right now I think that before I was on both sides of it, right, Carl? I could see it going either way. Seems like after that loss and after the Broncos losing 3 of their last 4 and the turnovers starting to normalize a tad, that we're back into probably heading towards a divorce from Wilson and the Broncos.
Yeah, I think there's one play that kind of sums it up for me. And I think it was a third down play. And perfect protection. I mean, there's place for him to step up. Both tackles have their guys to the outside. And there's 2 receivers. They're doing crossing routes across the way. Each of them are breaking open. And what does Russ do? He spins backwards, is running the other way with his head turned the other way in a completely perfect pocket and ends up spinning into a sack. And should have been a big play for the Broncos. Instead, turns into a sack, third down, going into fourth down. And that was the play that I'm just like, this is unacceptable in the NFL today. You know, I get he's made some magical plays, and he made a couple magical plays in the fourth quarter again. But when you can't have that consistent play in, play out ability on the field, it just, you're only going to go so far in the NFL. And it was hard to watch. It was great to watch him come back, only to fall short there at the end. Maybe that was a little bit of a balancing of some of the luck that they've had earlier in the year on a couple different games like the Buffalo Bills and stuff like that. But still, like when you have to have a game and you need your big $250 million quarterback to step up and make a few plays, especially when your number 1 wide receiver goes down, and instead he's taking sacks left and right. And it wasn't always bad protection either. You know, Barmore had a great game. Don't get me wrong. That was probably Miner's worst game of this season. But beyond that, there's a lot of plays where he had 4 or 5 seconds to hang on to the ball. And he still somehow was taking a sack when he had 4 or 5 seconds. And so, like I said, I'm at that point. I'm saying divorce needs to happen here between these two, the team and Russell Wilson.
Seems like it's heading that way. We will see what happens over these final 2 games. Still a lot on the table, but with the Broncos now just having a 5% chance of making the playoffs, according to most simulations, the odds are also long. It seems like that Russell Wilson is back, but we will see. Obviously, massive cap ramifications if there is a divorce. Michael Ronquillo coming in saying, good evening, Nick and Carl. I'm building the Broncos. Go Broncos. Good to see you, Michael. Hope you had a good holiday. Good to see you're nice, safe, and healthy, and appreciate you always coming in and contributing to the chat. We really do appreciate that. We also got our guy Turtle in the house saying, back to the same old confusion that has been here the last 7 years. I think we are good in my heart, but each season is gut-wrenching to watch. This season is probably leveling out to about what preseason expectations were, right? For most people, what did Vegas have them at? Probably 8.5 wins. Vegas is probably going to be right. I mean, they are going to be right. Obviously, just one or two, give or take. So probably about right in the end. The one thing I think that Vegas had baked into their formula that the Broncos have actually had the fortune of is this has been a pretty uninjured team this season overall compared to league average. I mean, given how many backup quarterbacks we've seen, Broncos, I think, have had the third most continuity on the offensive line of any team this season in the NFL. So Broncos are honestly a little bit of a beneficiary of injury luck this season. And we said year after year, eventually it's going to swing back, right? It's a coin flip every single time if you're going to have that. This is a year where it's happened. And unfortunately, have not taken full advantage of the injury luck that the Broncos have. Now, don't get me wrong, still injuries here or there, but you have to think like compared to league average, Denver is probably one of the lowest starting games lost from starters and snaps lost, but is what it is. You gotta just kind of where the team's at.
Yeah, no, I mean, you got to tip your hat to the training staff for doing really well this year compared to years past. I give it to the coaching staff for doing well with these players, getting them ready for games, getting them better prepared for it. Well, okay, we started 1-5, but compared to how they started last year with some of the confusion and not hardly doing any padded practices and all those kind of things, I would say the good thing we can take from this year is that we can feel pretty confident in this coaching staff moving forward. Mm-hmm. There's still a lot of missing pieces to make it work and to get into real contention, but I feel confident that they can get these players into the right place. There's like a lot of young players that have taken major steps up compared to years past. Nick Benito, McMillan, Browning. I know all of a sudden the names. Locke is another one. You look at the offensive line, obviously Miners has taken a huge step. Even I would say Bowles. Now all of a sudden we're really talking about bringing him back after the season he's had. He's one of those guys. He's shown over and over again. If you give him good coaching, he can be a good player. But when he gets bad coaching, he's not good enough to overcome that, unfortunately. And then you got Lloyd Cushenberry having a career year that's going to get him paid a lot of money. He should be thanking this coaching staff for a big part of his turnaround from seasons past. And so, again, great to see that. Cortland Sutton getting back into the swing of things. You've got a couple running backs that have really kind of emerged for you. P. Ryan, McLaughlin as well have made some really nice plays for you. So there's a lot of young, cheap players on this team that you can kind of say, okay, this is something we can build on. And then if they can get some of these other draft picks going, Marvin Mims, year 2, what's he going to be like? Is he going to be a bigger part of this offense? Can you get a quarterback that can really take advantage of what he brings to the table? He's got to work on those fumbles, though. Man, that's becoming a problem.
Can't have
but,
it.
Like I said, so I feel good about the coaching staff, which I have not felt good about the coaching staff in Denver for a long time. Mm-hmm. I like some of the young players. So if you can get that quarterback position figured out, working with Peyton, I think this team can get back on track real quick. It's in the NFL, you can turn around real quick once you get those things figured out.
Yeah, it's year to year. Who knows what the Broncos will look like. If they do go with a new quarterback, doesn't mean it's going to be better. You're still going to be on the hook a lot for dead cap with Russell Wilson, which is going to limit your ability to build up the team around him still. And you're going to have some really tough decisions regardless. So Broncos are not flush with salary cap space, and they're not flush with early top 100 draft picks either. So a lot of that progression from this year to next year is probably going to mostly come from guys already on the roster, which is a tough pill to swallow, especially after the spending last season that we saw from the Broncos. But they'll have avenues to add players still, without a doubt. So we'll see. But there's going to be turnover and, just some differences for sure.
Yeah. Well, what's not a tough decision is making Little Caesars the official pizza sponsor of the NFL and making it part of your game day, guys. every Sunday, I love to sit down with my kids, watch a game. This last Sunday, my mom was sitting there saying, "Hey, Broncos game is not going to be on TV. We're having family time." And I told her, "Well, I guess I'm not going to be at family time. I got to go eat pizza and watch the Broncos play." Next thing I know, Broncos game was on at her house. So, like I said, want to make sure the Little Caesars a part of your official game day. Order online during the Pizza pregame, 1 hour before and 3 hours after the NFL kickoff, and get ready for some football and fun.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely a crazy proponent for the stuffed crazy bread pepperoni pizza, as Michael's showing here with his pizza icons. That is my favorite. They have sausage, they have cheese, and you're never going to find a better deal than Little Caesars when it comes to pizza. It's a winning combination every day. And speaking of winning, everyone scores with the convenient delivery in our in-store pizza portal pickup. So grab some friends and enjoy a few slices during the upcoming games this week. And sorry, I was about to make another point there, Carl, but I could tell via your aura that you were ready for that pizza ad.
That's
so
right.
I wanted to pivot off of that a little bit. But yeah, I wanted to say hello to William coming in here saying, really like Kareem Jackson, but he's getting up there in age now. It was the right move to waive him. We have Locke, and then Stearns will be back next season with Simmons. So our safety room is basically set. Locke is a free agent after this year, so to be determined on that one. You also have two other safeties that might fit into the mix next season in JL Skinner, who has been a healthy scratch this season, but the Broncos never subjected him to waivers, also to try to sneak him on practice squad. So I think they still have hope for him without a doubt. And you have Delarrin Turner-Yell also there, but much more of just a special teams guy at this point. Wild card for the safety room also might be Riley Moss, who might get a shot at safety, especially that he's been playing some dime looks closer to the ball line of scrimmage. So the transition to safety might be there in the future. So we'll see. I don't know about set, but you do have bodies there. My question for you on this, Carl, though, the Broncos would have beaten the Patriots yesterday. Are we talking about the same reality where Kareem Jackson is waived?
I don't think so. I think then you're right there in the playoff hunt. I think you jump up to over 50%, if I remember right.
It's like 45 or something.
Yeah, it's right there, right at 50%. And he's one of those veterans. He's a leader in the locker room. I know the penalties and everything else, but especially with Locke being hurt right now, there's that story of he couldn't even fly out on the team plane to go to the Detroit game because doctors just wouldn't allow it. Now he still played, which is kind of crazy. Like he can't fly in a plane, but he can play in an NFL game. Now, I get altitude and everything else plays into that, but still, I would think playing in an NFL game would be more dangerous. Anyway, the fact that if he gets hurt, your backup safety position right now looking pretty darn slim. Like you said, Skinner's been a healthy scratch most of the year. D2Y, when he has played on the defense, has been horrific. And so as much as Kareem Jackson has been a liability, he's not been as much of a liability as those guys. And so I think he'd still be here with Denver. Good chance to probably get some playing time in this upcoming week, but I think they made the right decision. It's time to start getting some of these young players into the lineup. And maybe this is the question I wanted to ask you. Of some of our young players, who's maybe like two that you'd really like to see get some playing time over these final couple weeks?
I really want to see somebody at cornerback other than Fabian Moreau, just because he is for sure a 1-year mercenary. And if you bring him back next season, it's because you had other options fall through the cracks and he's back on veteran minimum. So I'd like to see either Damari Mathis get another shot. I know everyone, he was really bad when he played this season, but you still have 2 years of control with him and he is a good athlete. Or Riley Moss there at cornerback, just that opposite boundary corner, because otherwise you're going to the offseason with that a massive question mark opposite Surtain. So just to get some data as far as some options you already have on the roster. And I would also really like to see Drew Sanders get a little bit more work at linebacker. I know the Broncos are still playing for the playoffs right now, 5% chance, but that probably drops down to 0, even if they beat the Chargers this week, given how you have to have so much go right for you back-to-back weeks. You're probably going into that Raiders game knowing you're not going to make the playoffs. So at that point, then I definitely want to see, somebody like Josie Jewell inactive and Drew Sanders starting. So guys like that, you need to evaluate some of these young guys in these draft classes just to see not only if they are worth, have a bigger role next year, but even worth rostering with some of them. And obviously not the draft picks from the last year's draft class, the top 100 guys, but just more avenues and seeing if you have options here for older, expensive guys, because you're going to need young, cost-controlled players if we're talking about a world where you're eating $35.4 million dead in 2024, and I think it was like 41 or 42 million dead in 2025. So these young cost control guys, somebody's got to step up and take some of these snaps.
Yeah, I like Keith Brueggemann brings up Alec Palczewski. Palczewski. Yeah, sorry. It's been a while since we've had to say his name here on the show. Yeah, he would be an interesting one. Garrett Bowles, as much as I'd love to get him extended, that is a nice way that you can save some money is by moving on from him. But you need an option that you can feel comfortable with. And one, I don't know how much you could feel comfortable with him, even if he has 2 great games. Are you really going to sit there and say, yep, let's get Bowles out of here? This young guy only played 2 games in his NFL career. Let's have him protecting the next franchise quarterback of the Denver Broncos. Because I don't think he'd be playing right tackle. As much as I think we'd really like to see the Broncos be able to move on, just money talks. And I think they're probably going to be stuck with McGlinchey there at the right tackle spot next season.
Yeah, you're pretty stuck on the offensive line. Unfortunately, I really don't see many options to move on other than maybe some shifting at the center position, obviously with Lloyd Cushenberry. But unless you're trading Garrett Bowles, and honestly, I would not trade him unless you get a 1 back for him at this point with how he's played. Also, how you still have a year of contract where he's not going to be totally egregious against the cap. I mean, honestly, right now, Garrett Bowles might be your most valuable player on offense. Like if you were trading everybody on offense, he'd probably get the biggest return. So I don't know if I want to move on from him. Can you see Palczewski at right tackle? Maybe. I think he's far more likely to be battling for swing than anything else. So I don't know if he necessarily needs the snaps to be battling for swing. Obviously, you do want to see him out there in both of those, but that seems much more practice and training camp kind of stuff for him. So can he be the Cam Fleming for this Broncos team next year? I think that's probably more of the pathway for a Palczewski this season. And if you can get that from an undrafted free agent at one of the most correlated positions to draft position equaling NFL success, that's a major great job by the team evaluating, finding somebody like that and developing them. So that'd be great. I'd love to see some Alex Palczewski. Good call on that one.
Yeah. Another one I'd love to see either Wattenberg or Forsythe there at the center position. Mm-hmm. Just, I'm so glad for Cushenberry having the season that he's having. I'm glad that he's probably going to go out there and get a decent contract for some team. I'm probably just not wanting it to be with the Denver Broncos. The offensive line already pretty darn expensive when you've got 3 of the 5 positions on pretty decent veteran contracts. So you only got the 2 on the rookie contracts. I just don't want 4 of the 5 being these big things that you just really have to depend on these guys to stay healthy, play well, and just really take away. It kind of reminds me of like the Dallas Cowboys there for a few years. Their entire offensive line they were great. And it was the identity of their entire team, but it took away from being able to add anywhere else because they just were paying so much for everybody on that offensive line. And so I'd like to see a little bit better spread out of how they're using their cap money. Like I said, and moving forward, it's going to be tough just cap wise for the next couple of years to get some things figured out. But anyway, like I said, I'd love to see one of those guys get a couple starts in here, get them used to playing because most likely 4 of the 5 positions are locked up for next year. Like I said, I feel pretty confident they're going to try to keep Bowles unless they can get a really nice return for him. But I feel like they're going to try to get more of a long-term deal done for him. So just seeing what one of those guys can do, if they can build some nice chemistry heading into next season, then really have that be an identity of this team moving forward, that offensive line.
Kind of shows the state of the team right now, but I might even argue that the offensive line is already the offensive identity of this team.
Yeah.
And outside of the secondary, which did not have a great game, might be the second strongest unit on this team, which I think thinking about, it's not running backs, it's not tight ends, it's not wide receivers, It's not quarterback, it's not defensive line, it's not linebackers, it's not the edge rusher. Process of elimination, it might be the offensive line. And I know that a lot of the advanced metrics do like the Broncos. I think that, I posted it earlier. They have the 4th highest run block win rate according to ESPN. I think they're 9th in pass block win rate. I think Pro Football Focus likes them even more, like 6th in pass blocking percentages. So it might be the offensive strength, which is, I know a lot of people will shudder at that, but you can either think of that as a good thing for the Broncos offensive line or a bad thing everywhere else. I'll leave that to you. Want to say hello to some more people in here, of course, as you guys are all coming in, and don't have to leave a super chat to see you highlighted on here, although it's always helpful for us. But he says, my guest coming in saying, what's up, Nick, Carl, Scott, and Dylan in Broncos country. Always good to see you, Mike. Hope you're doing well. I'm curious to see how your Crimson Tide do this week. I'm really excited to see, man, talk about defensive guys. The Broncos are probably going to be watching this game. Alabama has 2 edge rushers and 2 cornerbacks that might be people the Broncos end up drafting in the first round. You got, of course, Dallas Turner, who probably gone before the Broncos pick, but we'll see. Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terrion Arnold, and Chris Braswell. So really fun. They also have talking offensive line, a right tackle who might be one of the singular strongest offensive linemen I've ever watched. With just his actual raw power, it's pretty unbelievable. Like the thought of him playing next to Quinn Miners would be, you could run to the right every time. I mean, you have to watch the penalties with Latham a bit, but that should be a fun game without a doubt. We got Run It Back saying, hot take here, Kareem Jackson should have been gone already. A 35-year-old undersized safety is no help to us. I know that Scott would definitely agree with you here on this one, Run It Back. Kareem's I think he's actually been playing okay this season, but the fact that you got him that late showed that you were not totally in love with your room to begin with, and he was a safety valve, so to speak. Well, safe for the Broncos roster construction, maybe not safe for the guys on the other side of the field. You were hoping for something else, but you kind of also showed that you needed him given you came into the season, PJ Locke was hurt. You came into the season, you had half a game from Caden Stearns. He was hurt. So you need some healthy guys out there too. And Kareem, if nothing else, man, he's been healthy.
Yeah. He has definitely been more of a liability this year. I think he's seen his athleticism obviously dropping as he gets older, and he's trying to compensate some of that by making some of these big hits and trying to make people think twice about running his direction. And I mean, that's been part of his game. He's not been as, what's the word I'm looking for? Not unhinged, but out of control as he has been this year and years past. He still had a few of those penalties, but not like we've seen this year where it's every game he's got maybe 2 hits that you're going, crap, there goes another one. And those penalties that are just killing the team. That's been the biggest issue with him this year is they're selfish plays. Some of them where it's like, okay, I get it. You're trying to make a big hit, but you don't have to leap up as this short 5'9" guy trying to hit a guy 6'5" up in his head. Like, go for his midsection. That's going to hurt just as much to get his wind knocked out of him as trying to go for a headshot. And so those kind of things, I don't mind the Broncos moving on, going with some younger players. I appreciate the time that Kareem Jackson was here. He had a lot of fun plays. I still remember, I think one of my favorites was actually when they played Houston, not this year, and a couple years ago. And I think Hopkins was coming over the middle, and Kareem Jackson just leveled him. And one of the few times we've seen Hopkins drop a pass because Kareem Jackson just hit him and separated ball from man. And so those kind of plays, it was kind of fun to watch him, especially get to have that fun against his old team.
Yeah, I'm happy for Kareem, and also to play with D'Amico Ryans and Stingley's he has like 5 interceptions at 5 straight games or something. Man, turnovers. I missed those. Man, I remember when the Broncos were turning the ball over left and right. Those were good days. 3 turnovers in the last 4 games versus, 13 over that winning streak? Who'd have thought those had dried up? Dylan Von Ark saying, sup Broncos country, make sure you guys hit that like button on the way in, share on all platforms, and subscribe if you haven't already. Always good to see you. We got Paul in the house saying, Nick and Carl, the OGs. Paul's been ride or die for like a decade. So appreciate you, Paul. Hope you're doing well. Always good to see from you. We got Lewis Gray says, well, this sucks. Of course, we blew it. You did kind of blow it, but you're also kind of normalizing to where you were. Like some of those games when the Broncos won, like that Bills game, you won the game, but those turnovers were pretty improbable. That Vikings game was wild too. It just feels like we've had a little bit of a normalization to the season over these last few weeks, and you're going to finish about a 9-win team, which Vegas had you at. I think that's probably about what the talent has you at as well as a 9-win team. There's holes on this team. It stinks because you have been so hunting for the playoffs. I mean, the second longest playoff drought in the NFL, not the AFC, but the NFL, I believe. Definitely the AFC because the Jets are like crazy amount of years since they've made the playoffs. But to be close, it's rough, but we got meaningful football games in December, and it still feels like this team is building in a positive direction right now.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Like I said, there's been some nice plays this year from young players stepping up that we haven't seen in years past. Some of the Cortland Sutton catches, those highlight plays have been missing for a lot of years. We've had maybe one or two a year where he's had 6 or 7 by himself. And then, you've got a couple nice catches by Marvin Mims, some great runs. Like we talked about earlier, the offensive line for the first time feels like it's actually looking good. How many years have we been complaining about this offensive line and saying, oh, this sucks, how we can't seem to get 5 consistent players on the field? And now there's 5 consistent players on the field every week. And I mean, they've had a couple down games, don't get me wrong, but I feel like those who get mad at the Broncos offensive line don't watch any other team but the Broncos, because they don't realize how bad offensive line play is around the league, where there's like 3 great teams, then maybe another 5 or 6 good teams, which that's where the Broncos are at. And then there's a bunch of bad. Like there's not really a whole lot of average. There's a bunch of bad.
And it's unfortunate for the offensive line and the functionality of the offense too, because I would argue you probably have the least synergistic quarterback in the NFL, at least for a veteran. A non-rookie contract quarterback is probably the most detrimental to the offensive line, because Russell Wilson's looking to dump it off. He doesn't really step up in the pocket consistently, and he's really not playing within the structure of the offense. I think there was a statistic today that Russell Wilson has the second least amount of pass dropbacks this season where the play occurred within the structure of the pocket. So I don't know about this. Maybe it's, extending beyond what the scheme is, or it's Sean Payton designing stuff to get him out of the pocket, because he does struggle within the structure of the pocket. But that's harmful for sure. Also, you have the lacking in the middle of the field passing, the short to intermediate passing, both, I think, rate-wise, bottom 5 in the NFL in terms of how often the Broncos are targeting the short and intermediate areas. So short being defined as 0 to 10 yards, intermediate 11 to 20. And because of that, you have so much more onus on your run game to overcome the lack of the quick game, the short intermediate game. And right now, I think the run blocking's been mostly pretty good, but the running backs are, they've been pretty damn poor. Teams knowing Jaleel McLaughlin's in there, it's going to be a run. They pin their ears back. I can't remember the last time Javonte Williams broke a tackle. His yards after contact's almost down like 2 whole yards from his rookie season. Now, not entirely his fault because of the injury, but you still put yourself in that situation where you're depending on him, and he's not been good enough for the running back spot. And Pirine also, maybe it's time to go with more shotgun runs with Pirine. I don't know. I think why don't we just run the 2-minute offense stuff as bull hockey because of the volatility of it, the turnover probability, and also the sacks you take. You're not running that early in the game and getting yourself out because you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're managing early, trying to avoid those negatives, and then unleashing that when you don't have any other choice. But I don't know, man. The discussion and the stuff around the offensive line, and talking to offensive line as well, it's like, yeah, it's a tough situation for them because they're damned if they do, damned if they don't.
Yeah, no, it's true. And so like I said, I think that's the nice part. Broncos can build around that moving forward for the offense. If you can find a quarterback that can work within structure, I think you're going to be very impressed at how good this unit looks. I know a couple people have already said, well, McGlinchey's been terrible this year. Yeah, he started out the season really bad, and he's gotten a little bit better, had a couple bad games. So he's been up and down throughout the year. But you look at the rest of that offensive line, and they've been very much a plus compared to years past. There's been some plays. This last game is a great example. There's about 4 or 5 dropbacks where Wilson had at least 5 seconds to sit back there and do anything he wanted with the football. That's really hard to do in the NFL with the athleticism that's across the way from them.
Anything over 3 seconds is either pressure because of scheme or because of the quarterback. It's not because of the offensive line. Now, it's hard because everything in football is in a system, not in a vacuum. So it's really hard to pull apart the variables and isolate them. But you see some of the plays. I always come back to Trevor Siemian where he's getting pressured in sack, but you see the offensive tackles set for a quick set. They are only getting so much depth because the quarterback's supposed to hit his 3-step drop and hit the ball out. Well, guess what happens when he keeps retreating? You completely lose that angle and you're outside the scope of what the play was designed to be. And I know that's part of what the magic with Russell Wilson. It's some of what you live with him, no doubt, because you are hunting for those explosives but you're not getting them at the same rate anymore. And the negative plays, being sacks and turnovers, have not also decreased, while the explosives have decreased as well. So it's a tough situation, without a doubt, and it makes the product look like what it did, especially when you lose probably, and it's not all Russell Wilson, probably when you lose your only true difference-making pass catcher on the offense as well. I mean, it becomes a horrible product to watch, and I don't even know how many guys could have actually played quarterback and been good there, but not helping them either.
Yeah. I will say I was pretty impressed with Brandon Johnson in the game that he had. I think he can be a decent depth player for the Broncos next season. I can't remember if he has more time left on his contract, maybe one more year. I'll have to look later. But yeah, I thought he was a nice, once Sutton went down, he was that nice next player to step up and be the consistent guy that Russell Wilson could go to. Jerry Jeudy had himself an okay game. Marvin Mims obviously made the one big catch. But still, you could tell Wilson was not comfortable once Sutton went down.
Yeah.
And there's plays where guys were open, but he just was almost afraid to let it fly. Because, I mean, I get it. It's nice when you've got a guy like Sutton that you can just throw it up to and boom, he's going to catch that. Like 75% of the time, he's probably coming down with that football. And Jerry Jeudy's not doing that. Brandon Johnson's not doing that. Marvin Mims is not doing that for you.
Yeah, and I don't want it to be kind of has become that, but I don't want it to be purely, dumping on Wilson in this game. I think he's been somewhere between the 10th to 19th best quarterback in the NFL this season. Most of the advanced analytics would say that's about where he's at as well. And I'd say that's eye test from what I've seen. You can win with that, but it becomes pretty darn hard to do that when you can only play a certain style of game to game to win. There's the margin. Sean Payton said after the game, your margins are just non-existent right now because of how games have to follow this just crazy thin path. What do they say about the eye of a needle with a camel, Carl? I don't know that quote. That's kind of how the Broncos are having to win these games. But yeah, it's not all Wilson. I think that if people want to point at the offensive line, I think that you could obviously get better there. No doubt. McGlinchey's been problem minors and pass protection sometimes, powers and run blocking. I mean, there are things here and there, but I think if you're going to give any a benefit or kind of point the finger elsewhere off of Wilson, I think it's more so the running backs specifically and the pass catchers, because outside of Sutton, I just don't know if there's anybody on here who is beyond, league average, what wins above replacement. I feel like you got a bunch of zeros out there about league average guys, unfortunately. So it's not all Wilson. I think if you had better weapons supporting him around him, you might have something a little bit better here, but you don't. And it's not really meshing well with where defenses are playing nowadays. And it seems like what Sean Payton wants to do. But first, we got Chase coming in saying, howdy, y'all. Good to see you, Chase. Always appreciate you coming in. We got Pearl Heater also saying, good evening, everybody. Good to see you, Pearl. Appreciate you. Joey Grubb saying, can't keep Russ 2 more years with what he is. We'll be making a move. Seems that's probably what's happening. But we got 2 more games, folks. I mean, obviously, the best predictor of future performance is past performance. And what we've seen this season probably has not been good enough. And it's probably what we'll see the last 2 games. But who knows? I mean, Chargers look like they were alive against the Bills. That was kind of a fun game. And then you had the Raiders. I mean, God, who knows what these last 2 games will bring? Maybe even the Broncos will make the playoffs. Future's not written yet. There's still a chance. I think they're still going to be hunting until that chance is gone. Patrick coming in saying, aloha, building the Broncos. Would not break my heart to see Wilson sent packing. Patrick, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit here. I love you. You're my guy. Thank you so much for the magic beans that we appreciate. It is going to break my heart a little bit because I honestly do believe that Russell Wilson is trying his darndest. I don't think there's a mean, spiteful bone in him. I think he's giving it everything he possibly has. And I think he's a good person. I think he does things the right way. So for Wilson himself, my heart does break for it because I really do want it to work. I think he's a good guy. I'm not cheering against him by any means, but it's a results business at the end of the day. And as long as you're not, this isn't the longest yard in a team full of felons or something out there, then the results are going to outweigh who you are and, what you do in the community and whatnot. So it does break my heart. I'm sad about it. And also it's because it breaks my heart because the best thing for the Broncos would be if Russell Wilson ended up being that perennial top 8 guy. It doesn't look like that. And if with a divorce, guess what, guys? If you think it's all Sean Payton, you think it's all Russell Wilson, time is going to pass. And we're going to be able to look back with hindsight and say, okay, well, actually, what was the reality? Kind of like watching Teddy Bridgewater versus Drew Lock. Well, let's see how time passes for both these guys. Probably both not viable starting quarterbacks. And hopefully that's not what we're heading for the future of this Broncos team at quarterback.
So here's I'll call it the $250 million question.
Okay.
If you do move on from Russ, how are you attacking the quarterback position this offseason?
Oh man, Carl, that's so hard to say because my first thought, the real simplest one is what Sean Payton wants. Sean, within reason, Sean Payton gets. There's a lot of people on this team that are still going to even have jobs because of what he did this season, turning the team around and getting that culture and winning some games with coaching and scheme and red zone scheme, especially. Even though not a great game from Sean Payton, I thought the red zone designs were awesome in this game from him. So I think people have jobs on that team because of Sean Payton still. So what Sean Payton wants, Sean Payton gets. That's the easy answer. The hard one would be, I mean, you got to look at everything possible. Based on what Sean Payton's done historically, I think you probably have them first look at reclamation projects of former early picks because of what we saw with, Teddy Bridgewater, what we saw with Jameis Winston. You see those even Drew Brees, right? He was a second round pick. He looked good. So those kind of rehabilitation kind of guys. Does that mean Jameis Winston's back? Does that mean somebody like Trey Lance, Justin Fields? I don't know. I think Jacoby Brissett would be awesome in this system. If you're just looking for a guy who can just be pure system, work the middle of the field and get it to the right read. Brissett was unbelievable for the Browns there last year in that. I don't understand how he didn't get a starting spot. But after that, I mean, the long-term answer has got to be coming through the draft, I would assume. I think there are 3 that are going to go in the top 10. I don't know if you have the draft picks to move up to the top 10 in this draft. Then you move on to like J.J. McCarthy. Is he even coming out? Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Michael Pratt, Spencer Rattler for the wild card. I don't know. It's a tough spot. When you are going to be picking in the top 5, it's a lot easier to say we move up, 2 spots for a quarterback. Now you're talking about a team. What are they picking right now? 14? There's just so many variables. So I think you have to approach it first with somebody that you come in, unless you like Stidham enough. I don't know. We're not in there seeing practice, but probably somebody like a Brissett, and then you hunt in the draft, but you're not screwed for the season if you miss out on quarterback. You cannot go into the draft where it's like, if I don't take a quarterback, I'm boned, because otherwise you're already teams will have you over a barrel at that point.
Right. Well, yeah, they're going to say, oh, you're offering us 3 first-round picks. We want 3 first-round picks. Your next couple second-round picks, because we don't have one this year.
Your firstborn, Patrick Surtain.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Whatever we want, you're going to give us because you don't have a quarterback.
Yep.
And so, yeah, you're right. You got to find something that at least gives you a guy that you could feel halfway comfortable with starting. And like I said, Sean Payton has done great with reclamation projects. He's one of those, he's kind of the quarterback whisperer for the broken, I would say. He's just, I don't know. He's done well with all those kind of guys. And my heart of hearts kind of guy is still Sam Darnold. I know he's been terrible in the NFL so far, but you know how much I loved him in the draft coming out and was hoping the Broncos would go up and get him. And I still think there's something there. I mean, he still has arm talent. It's just the mental side of the game has just obviously been horrific up to this point for him. I know there's been talk of the Bears. What are they going to do? Justin Fields is one of those guys probably going to be out there. I don't know who's going after him. I know like our friend Eric keeps saying Atlanta is going to go in that kind of direction. I don't know if we'll see that happen or not, but there's going to be plenty of teams if they decide to move on from him that are going to at least put in a trade offer. I don't know if that would be the Broncos or not. There's a couple other guys. I mean, Jaden Daniels is another one. I'm not sure he's a great fit with Sean Payton because he's not a great like in the system quarterback. He needs to be able to move. And
I mean, it's hard to say because Sean Payton to his career to date, now granted it expands a huge amount of time, but like early Drew Brees was a lot different than late Drew Brees. What he did with Teddy Bridgewater was a lot different from what he did with Taysom Hill, which was a lot different from what he did from Jameis Winston. I do think that you do have to be able to play within structure somewhat. And if not, you better be bringing something special as an athlete as well. Kind of what we saw with Taysom Hill. And right now you're not getting that from the quarterback spot. But I think he's a little bit more of a chameleon with what you could go with still, even though the Russell Wilson experience hasn't worked out very well. But I mean, it's because the Russell Wilson experience always devolves into the same exact style of offense. Some schemes and concepts are different, but like the areas you can attack and the areas you can't attack, doesn't matter who the offensive coordinator is, doesn't matter who the players are around him. It always kind of turns into the same thing.
Yeah. And I think it's like I said, it's hard. How do you design an offense that can't work on time as an offensive coordinator.
You better be freaking unbelievable at running the football and then hitting those home runs, which the Broncos have not been able to do well enough. I don't think you have enough weapons that fit with that. I mean, maybe if Tim Patrick was healthy, maybe if Javonte Williams was looking like Javonte Williams before the injury, maybe we're having a conversation, but you just don't have that right now. And it's putting a lot of the onus on Russell Wilson. And if Russell Wilson was a second-year quarterback on his rookie contract, completely different conversation. We can build around that. You can build towards that. I mean, it's a long-term perspective. You're talking about a guy who's going to be 36 next year, and really your only window for the next 2 seasons, where if you were going to move on, it's this. Just it is unfortunate timeline wise for him, but we will see. I mean, I guess I am a little envious of the decision makers because they get to make the decisions and that's fun. But this is not an easy one by any means. And I think there's going to be plenty of wish-washing along the way about the pathways they could go. I don't know. It's a tough one. I'm really glad I don't have to be behind the fans' crossbars on that one.
Yeah. I mean, it is how this always goes with quarterback conversation. You know, everybody's going to have their favorites. And if you don't pick the favorite, you're going to be angry about it. I get it. You and I, we always have our favorites that we look at and say, this is the guy I want. Some of our guys have worked out well in the NFL. Some of our guys have crashed and burned. Darn Paxton Lynch cost me a lot. But anyway, beyond that, like I said, it'll be interesting to see, one, who's all going to come out. Like you said, that's going to be a big question of how many guys can you even see going in the first round? You know, are there going to be 4 guys that you can feel comfortable with, where if you are picking, let's say 12th in the draft, that you can feel like, okay, if we move up to maybe 8, one of our guys is still going to be there that we really like. You know, I have a hard time seeing the Broncos be able to make it into the top 3. Unless, I mean, like I said, Sean Payton gets what he wants. And if he says, I want to get top 3, then they're going to do what it takes. But man, that cost, it's going to be monumental. And I know teams have done it before. I think, who was it? Was it Philly that traded up from like 14 to get to, was it pick 1 or pick 2?
They got to pick 2 when they took Wentz.
Yeah. Okay. Pick 2.
And you had the 49ers give up 3 first-round picks to move from 12 to 3 to take Trey Lance. That didn't work out very well. But I don't know. I just not really sitting on a war chest of draft picks right now. You kind of blew that when you spent it on Wilson. That was your shot. You built that up for multiple years, trading guys at the trade deadline when your season was over. And okay, this is the shot. Blimey, here we are, unfortunately. But you know, yeah, I guess I appreciate them taking a shot, even if they didn't, because you can't just kick the can every single year. At some point, you got to put your money where your mouth is, in my opinion.
Right.
We got Alabama coming in saying, oh, no, we suck again. We don't suck again. We're just, aggressively mediocre, it seems like. Matt Martin is saying, will the Broncos keep Russ? I don't know. If you know, please let me know. We'll find out here soon. Matt also saying, what happened years back with Flacco? I think that was a team that was pretty devoid of talent and trying to play a way that didn't match as much. And also Flacco's playing with one of the best defenses in the last 15 years on the other side. So they're just letting him sling it right now. And that's kind of, God, what was the show? Last game of the, it was Waterboy, right? Last game of the year. Can't hold anything back now. It's kind of how Flacco's going out there. It's pretty wild to see. It's honestly wild to see all these former Bronco quarterbacks out here playing.
And they do have a pretty good offensive line there in Cleveland, where when he was here at Denver, it wasn't obviously great, and he doesn't have any kind of ability to move. And like I said, with that defense, it does allow him to make throws that otherwise you wouldn't want him to make, because it puts your team in a bad spot, where with that defense, you're like, they're going to stop him. So yeah, if you want to launch it 40 yards down the field, go for it. Let's just see what happens. And Cleveland, I mean, I have to say, this has to be one of the most impressive seasons with bad quarterback play for a team. The Broncos in 2015, nothing against Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler, but it wasn't a great year quarterback-wise. They made it work. Browns are doing something pretty similar to what the Broncos did back then, because their quarterbacks, none of them have been good at all this year. And somehow they still keep winning games. You just keep thinking, oh, they're on like their 4th quarterback. They got to lose this week. Nope, they win. So it's pretty impressive.
It is impressive, too, when you look at the AFC North. I mean, every single one of those teams is viable playoff contender with the Ravens. Best team in football, I guess. I mean, God, they took it to the 49ers. That was wild. But the fact that they're hanging around in that division, I mean, let's be real, guys. That AFC West in 2015, not a murderer's row, but the Broncos took advantage of it. And hey, when you got a shot, take advantage of it. It's one reason why this season with the Chiefs being so bad really feels like a missed opportunity. But we'll see. They're going to have to reinvent themselves a little bit. Joe Anthony coming in saying, why sit Russell Wilson against the Raiders? The big kick with Russell Wilson and potentially sitting him against the Raiders. I guess if you're trying to evaluate Stidham as an option next season, that's something I don't think I've heard people talk about at all yet. But the big reason is it's kind of like what we saw the Raiders do with Derek Carr last year. There's a big bunch of money that becomes guaranteed if the player is injured. So if you don't want to pay Russell Wilson that, you're not going to pay him. You don't want to pay him that. You probably shouldn't play him because if he gets hurt, guess what? He's going to be here. And that's an uncomfortable situation. You don't want to be in that spot. So if you know darn well that you're moving on from Russ and your season's over, I can't imagine playing him.
Yeah. Part of me wishes they would go ahead and just play Stidham this week, so you get 2 weeks of evaluation, which is still not a whole lot quarterback-wise. But I doubt it with, like I said, there's about a 5% chance you still make the playoffs. I think until that number gets down to 0, you won't bench Russell Wilson. Yeah. And so you're just going to have to hope that he doesn't get hurt, so then you at least have a decision to make. I think if he gets injured, that's the problem. Then you don't have a decision. It's like, he's here next year. This is what it has to be.
Yeah. Oh, man, it is going to be very tough. I see Keith talking about adding $40 million more. I'd have to look at the exact numbers for moving on from Russell Wilson, but there's no doubt if you're moving on from Russell Wilson, it is with a post-June 1st designation. So I think that the money is honestly about the same, keeping him or moving on from him next season with the post-June 1st. It's just you're paying him the same here or not with a post-June 1st designation. It might be off by a few million here or there, chump change to the Walton Penners. But I definitely think that it has to be a June 1st designation. So as Scott mentions here in the comments for us, it's roughly cap neutral for the Broncos. So it really depends on if you'd just rather move on and, get a new option in there and not have any weirdness in the locker room, which I don't know. We'll see. We got Matt coming. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the nice thing for the Broncos is I know cap wise, like I said, they look like they're in a rough spot, but they have a lot of contracts that they can move around, that they can either restructure, extend, whatever they want to do to open up a lot of cap space. They can cut some guys to open up some cap space. We've talked about it before. Tim Patrick is definitely one of those guys you probably cut. Maybe you can bring him back on a cheaper contract. I'm trying to think who else you got. You got DJ Jones is another one that's pretty easy to move on from. So like I said, the Broncos can open up a lot of cap space real quick. And then the other part that they have is because of having all this cash from the owners, you can really design contracts to be low cap hits year 1, year 2, where it's year 3 that they're starting to hit. And then you can start trying to figure out how you rework those deals, and you can keep kicking the can down the road a little bit. So it's not like the Broncos are completely stuck right now. You got to be careful. Don't get me wrong. When you cut this kind of contract, it's going to hurt, but it's going to hurt less because they have the Penner group here.
Yeah. I mean, having a wealthy ownership group definitely helps as long as they are smart with their money. You don't want the David Tepper Carolina stuff going on where they're rich, but they are involved in making football decisions. You can do the business side, but hopefully leave the football to the football people. You have people like Jerry Jones who have money and they're all about it, but Jerry would rather win doing it his way than putting somebody else in power and win. It wants to be his way. If it's your team and your money, God bless. I'm glad I'm just not cheering for that team. We got All Access coming in saying I came in late. What was the gamble? I think the gamble was that the Broncos subjected Kareem Jackson to waivers, and it was reported that if he made it through waivers, that the Broncos would bring him back and put him on the practice squad. You could then elevate him for those 2 games. His salary was already guaranteed, so it's really more about the roster spot than anything else. But I guess unfortunately, that probably doesn't really matter too much other than probably some sad people in the Broncos locker room because Kareem Jackson was a popular guy there. But the Texans claimed him. He gets to go play for a playoff team, D'Amico Ryans. So Denver would have brought him back if he cleared waivers. Didn't clear waivers. He's now a Houston Texan. So gamble on the quote there didn't pay off. Yeah,
it's like I said, it was a low risk, low reward kind of situation for him. And I don't blame them from trying to move on not even really move on, but try to get him on the practice squad. And this is where you talked about it earlier. there's been a couple players that the team has been afraid to put out there on the practice squad or to cut and put back on the practice squad because other teams have wanted to try to scoop them up. JL Skinner's one of those. Alex Forsyth is another, where they've both been healthy scratches all year, but they've pretty much just said, we're willing to keep these guys on the back end of this roster because we think there's some talent there that we could maybe see in the future with the Broncos. I know another player that has been kind of up and down on the roster, DiNucci.
Yeah.
Sounds like there's been a couple teams that have put in claims for him. And so that means the Broncos had to bring him back up on the roster. That's why you've seen that a couple weeks so far this year.
Yeah. And also they're trying to, help him out a little bit, maybe get him some more money there at the end. But yeah, you got to protect those guys sometimes. Donnie Claus coming in and said, definitely have to fix the offensive line. Need a pass rusher. Need more out of Jerry Jeudy. Go Broncos. Happy holidays to you, Donnie. We talked a little bit about the offensive line earlier. Also been talking, obviously, a little bit of draft too. Even though Carl and I are probably higher on the Broncos offensive line than most people, I guess not higher than the metrics. I wouldn't have them as a top 8 offensive line right now. I think they're probably closer to 12. But I still, even if say it is a top 8 offensive line, that doesn't mean the Broncos aren't going to go out there and continue to try to build the offensive line. This is a Sean Payton team after all, and comes from the Parcells school of thought. And really it's a log on the fire methodology when you're talking about the offensive line. You don't want to wait until the offensive line is a problem to invest in it. You want to make sure that you're continually adding logs to the fire to keep it going. We saw it a few times with the Saints as well. The offensive line there looked fine, but they go out there and use a first-round pick on a position and just find a spot for him. Looks like it's going to be a pretty good offensive tackle draft. I've seen, I think, Dane Brugler of The Athletic, who does a really good job with the draft, mentioned that we could break the all-time record for offensive tackles drafted in the first round in this draft, partially because there aren't defensive tackles really that are worth the pick, but an edge rusher is questionable too as far as the volume goes. But we'll see. I'm not against continuing to improve the offensive line, even if they are maybe the best unit on the offense, which is not great.
And I see some of the people in our chat. They're talking your language here, talking about getting teammates from Iowa to come join Riley Moss here in Denver.
Yeah, I mean, I would love Cooper DeJean if that's who we're talking about for adding another defensive back from that Iowa team. I would typically be, and this is me being an Iowa fan, I would typically be a little bit concerned from the pure boundary corner types at Iowa because they play so limited different types of coverages and schemes, and you almost have zero tape reps of press coverage, which in the NFL, if you're going to play boundary cornerback, you better damn well be able to play some man. They don't really run too much man. There's a lot of press bail, a lot of cover 4 out there. So it can be rough as far as that transition to the NFL. But I think Cooper DeJean is different. I think that he's going to test unbelievably. He broke I want to say it was his tibia 2 weeks before the end of the regular season. So we'll see what happens with the testing. But I'm hearing he's all good to go. He might go back to Iowa, Carl. Still, there's actually some talk there, which would be, I would not recommend him doing that. If you're going to be a first round pick at cornerback, go to the league. It's the difference between being a top 20 pick and a number 1 pick like you have at quarterback. It makes sense for the quarterbacks to go back. They're getting paid at college anyway these days. But cornerback, I'd tell him to go personally. I think he's going to test phenomenally. Everybody I've spoken to talk about him being just a brilliant player. Last year when Riley Moss was drafted, I'm like, yeah, Riley Moss is good. Wait until you see the guy next year, though. He is different. The guy who I compare Cooper to is Minkah Fitzpatrick. Just because he is apparently just like the brightest guy in that locker room and super versatile and a great tackler and just amazing instincts and ball skills. So we'll see what happens. I'm not going to go as far as I think Nate Tice compared him to Jalen Ramsey, which is nuts to me because Ramsey's probably the best defensive back prospect we've seen in a decade. But we'll say Cooper DeJean's a lot of fun, and I'm just hoping he does not end up in the AFC or AFC West where I have to cheer against him.
There you go. Yeah, I saw something the other day, and it was, I think it was Archie Manning is making $5 million or something like that to be the backup in Texas. And Brock Purdy, one of those guys competing for the MVP in the NFL, is making $870,000 this year. So some of those, that's why some of this NIL stuff, it's going to be interesting seeing it moving forward, how it affects players that come out, which ones don't. You talked earlier, JJ McCarthy is one of those guys. Is he really going to come out or not? If they lose the national championship, is he going to go back to fight for one? Even if they win one, does he want to go back and try to repeat kind of thing? It's going to be amazing to see his journey moving forward. So, like I said, the Broncos, they can go a million different ways with especially that first round pick. And I can understand why they would do any of those moves. I don't think there's too many that I would, other than I wouldn't go running back, obviously. I wouldn't go linebacker. Safety, probably not, just because I don't mind where the room is at right now. I don't know if you need a top tier guy to really add to that group unless you're trading Justin Simmons. But otherwise, I think the rest of it's pretty wide open. Even tight end, if you go Bowers, I could really get behind that pick.
Love Bowers. I could be awesome for the offense, especially with how much heavy you like to see from this team and the versatility. I think he could be that kind of. We've heard Peyton mention a few times. I cannot remember what he calls the position, but that like Kamara position where you're isolating a joker. Yes, that's what he calls it. That he could be a joker. I mean, he led NFL or college football tight ends in YAC, I think 3 years in a row. And that was including two pretty good tight end classes recently. And I think number 2 last season was actually Sam Laporta in that terrible Iowa offense. Maybe should have seen that one coming, I guess, huh? But I'd be about Bowers. I don't know if I'm about trading up for a tight end. And I think from where you're at right now, he's probably going top 8. I can't imagine getting up into the top 8 for a tight end. And after that, I mean, it's kind of a barren wasteland at tight end this year in the first round. I agree with you in principle too, Carl, about linebacker and safety. The thing is, I don't think we're going to have much of a choice this year because looking over the prospects and the guys that I've watched, I don't sniff a mid-first round linebacker or safety this year.
Right.
They don't. The only guy that might fit that bill would be Cooper DeJean moving to safety, but you got to try him at cornerback first. He's too athletic, and that's too valuable of a spot to not try him there first. So I think that the people who don't want to draft those off-ball linebackers will be okay because I just don't think that we'd know names by now if there were guys talking about in that realm, and it's not happening this year.
Right. No, I'm with you. We've talked a little bit about interior defensive line. Pretty bare there as well for this draft. So I'm not sure. There's one player that I'm trying to, his name escaping me right now real quick, but
what school?
Is it Illinois?
Oh, you're talking about interior defensive line. I heard offensive line.
Interior defense. Yeah.
Jerzon Newton goes by Johnny Newton out there at Illinois. Yes.
So he's one player that's getting a little bit of hype. The couple guys from Texas, but they're more of kind of the second, third round kind of hype at this point. So I have a hard time seeing the Broncos lean that way in this draft. I'm kind of thinking it's going to be wide receiver, cornerback, quarterback, or cornerback.
You said the position. I would, if I was doing odds right now, Carl, you said the one position that I would put the highest odds on, and you didn't say it actually. Edge rusher.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry. Yes, I meant to say edge. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Edge as well. Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be the one thing for sure. Broncos have number one, a multitude of directions they could go. That makes a lot of fun. We're not just going to be zeroing in. I mean, heck, I'd even toss in offensive line, offensive tackle still as well, and just find a way to get them on the field. And even if they have to be a backup year one, I don't give a hoot, really. I mean, I don't, especially if you're taking a dead cap with Wilson. You're probably not contending for a Super Bowl next year anyway, in that regard. So getting somebody that can really help fortify that and build a true identity of this being an offensive line team, that pays off, a few years down the road. Does that line up very well with Sean Payton's time in Denver? I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. Talking about interior defensive line too, Carl, but based on what you said about the unit, typically that's a position that takes 2 to 3 years. If Denver wants to get better on the interior defensive line next year, it's probably going to have to come from guys already on the roster, or somebody in free agency. Not a big contract, but you can find competent bodies out there in defensive line every year, and there's going to be a lot on the market. So if they can free up some cap, I think that's where I would be a proponent of spending some money. I'm also a proponent of Michael Ronquillo spending some money on the show. Thank you so much, Michael, for the stars on this holiday season, being super generous here today with all your support. We really do appreciate you keeping the lights on for building the Broncos and all the things that we do here at Mile High Huddle. Shout out to you, man. We would not be doing it without you here supporting the show. And not everybody, especially after the holidays, is in a position to contribute financially. That's okay. We're here hanging out anyway, but super chats make sure that, we don't have Chad with the hook off screen here pulling us off one day. So appreciate you, Michael, keeping the lights on for us here at Building the Broncos.
Yeah. Thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate it every week. And I hope you all have a happy new year and 2024. Hopefully all good things coming up for each and every one of our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see what happens. Broncos got 2 games left. The future's not written. I mean, there's still a reality out there. If the Chiefs keep stinking and lose 2 games and Denver wins 2 games, AFC West champion Denver Broncos. I mean, that's not probable, but you got to play until you don't have any chance left. So that's why you finish it out. And I think the Broncos aren't going to fold up shop. Sean Payton wouldn't allow that. I mean, he's definitely an authoritarian type out there in that team. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, big news today, I guess, is Kareem Jackson now at the Houston Texans. We'll see what happens with him. It'll be weird to see him in that uniform again. Kind of a fun storyline to have him going back to the team that drafted him at cornerback. Top 10? I don't remember. He was a first-round pick all those years ago coming out of Alabama. So back out there in Houston where it started for him. So fun to see that. Broncos now, we got to see what happens at the safety spot opposite of Justin Simmons going forward. Are they going to keep playing PJ Locke? I'd assume so. But that safety spot is a question as well. And I think that, like you mentioned, Carl, I agree with you. If Denver had beaten the Patriots, I think Kareem is still here. But because not, we're kind of the soft feeling out stage. If Denver loses the Chargers, expect a exhibition-like roster starting from the Broncos in that last game. But we'll see. Still 2 games, and you got stuff to play for.
That's right. Well, Nick, good to see you again. Hope you and your family have a great New Year. You as well, Scott, in the background working. And like I said, Broncos country, thank you guys for sticking with us throughout all of this year, all the ups and downs. And like I said, 2024, I'm excited to see what the Broncos are able to do.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And before we close it out here, Carl, I want your college football playoff picks here. We got Alabama going against Michigan in the Rose Bowl. And then we got, of course, I almost said Houston Texans, Texas Longhorns versus the Washington Huskies. So who do we got on the first in the college football playoff games, the last of the 14 college playoffs?
So I'm going to say, I'm sorry, Mike S. I'm going to pick Michigan over Alabama. I think they're just the most balanced team in all of college football. And then I'm going to pick Texas over Washington. Washington has had a few close games this year that they just kind of figured out a way to win. Texas with getting Ewers back, I just feel like they've got a little bit more talent overall than that of Washington. So I'm gonna go Michigan and Texas for the finals, and then I'll have Michigan winning on this one. Jim Harbaugh getting his first national championship.
Will be very interesting. The college football landscape is changing dramatically. We're gonna have to have like a HBO documentary or multi-series over like what's happened to the last 5 years and what's going to happen in the next 5 years in college football because it's evolving so fast. But one thing I do know is that the teams that have consistently great recruiting classes are the best teams. I mean, I think it's like every single team that's ever won the college football playoffs has had at least 3 to 5 top 100 players. And there are 2 teams in the college football playoffs that out recruit the other 2, and that's Alabama and Texas. Doesn't mean that they're always going to win, but based on the data, the teams that have the highest stars and recruits tend to win football. Now, will that stay the same in the portal era? I don't know. We're in the Wild West now. We'll see what happens. But
who are you rooting for?
Who am I rooting for? I'm rooting for the Huskies. Like the stadium's right over here. If I didn't do that, I'd be in some serious trouble. So definitely rooting for the Huskies out here.
Yeah, that's where my wife graduated from. So I got to root for them.
Go Dogs. Yeah, bow wow. Not Dogs, Scott. I'm not going to mess that one up. That got on me last time. The Dogs with a southern accent. Go Dogs. I'm hoping Washington can win it. Also, a good cap for the Pac-12 closing out. Now the Pac-2, I guess. But pulling for Washington, I think it's going to be Texas-Alabama with Alabama winning it. But we'll see. Who knows? That's why you play the games. I think this is probably the first playoff, though, where literally every single team in it has a viable pathway to winning it. Yeah. But I don't know. We've seen the sunrise and the sunset many times. Alabama versus Texas in this one. I think Alabama wins it all with beating Texas. But we'll see. A lot of fun. Hope everyone had a great holiday weekend. Hopefully everybody's enjoying this weird in-between week. The taint of the holidays, if you will, in between Christmas and New Year's, as I've heard it called. So hopefully we don't get flagged for that one. But appreciate everyone. Make sure you're following Carl and I on Twitter. Carl is at Carl Dumler MHH. I'm at Nick Kendell MHH. Also follow us at Mile High Huddle. If you haven't done so yet, follow us at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle and facebook.com/Mile High Huddle pod. And as that ticker says underneath, please subscribe to the show, like like our show, and also share on your social media platforms. It's the number one way to help us. We always appreciate that when you guys can do that. You don't have to contribute financially at all. It just takes 2 seconds. Thumbs up, like it, everything like that. We appreciate you guys. Carl, good to see you. At some point, we probably got to have a conversation of what my immediate future looks like, but appreciate all you guys. Have a good one. Continue to choose kindness and compassion. Go Broncos.